People often mistake emotional withdrawal for peace. They think silence means safety, but here's the truth. Sometimes silence is control. Sometimes the person you love most is using distance as a weapon. And if you don't wake up to that, you'll spend your life begging for the affection of someone who's already decided they're not going to give it. This will sting. But you need to hear it, because recognizing manipulation, especially when it hides behind avoidance, is the first step toward reclaiming your soul. Avoidants use emotional distance as control, not protection. This is one of the most painful truths to accept, because on the surface, their withdrawal appears innocent, even justified. They say they need space, time, peace, or clarity, and if you're an empathetic person, you respect that. You step back, believing you're honoring their boundaries. But deep down, what's actually happening is a subtle inversion of power. They've learned, often unconsciously, that the more they withhold, the more you invest. They pull away and you chase. They grow cold and you grow desperate to thaw them. It's not malice necessarily. It's habit, a defense mechanism that evolved into a means of control. You see, avoidants learned long ago that closeness equals danger. Maybe it came from a childhood where love was inconsistent or overwhelming. Maybe affection was tied to shame or punishment. So they developed a strategy: emotional distance equals safety. But when they enter adult relationships, that strategy doesn't disappear. It transforms. The very thing that once protected them becomes a weapon. They don't consciously decide to manipulate, but they learn through repetition that distance keeps them powerful and desired. The more uncertain you are, the more energy you give. And that energy feeds them not their love, but their need to feel in control of vulnerability. So they create cycles of connection and withdrawal. When they sense you're comfortable, they pull back, and when you panic, they know they still matter. You become trapped in a psychological loop, mistaking their silence for significance. You start believing that your devotion can melt their walls. But here's the cruel truth: they don't build walls to be melted. They build them to watch who will keep knocking. And in your attempts to prove your loyalty, you slowly trade your self-respect for crumbs of emotional engagement. The avoidant thrives on ambiguity. They rarely give you clarity because clarity ends their advantage. When you don't know where you stand, you become easy to control. You seek reassurance. You question your worth. You overanalyze every message and every pause. They've reduced you to an emotional detective in your own relationship, constantly trying to solve the mystery of their affection. That's not love, that's conditioning. And the longer you participate in it, the more your nervous system begins to confuse instability with passion. You'll start calling it chemistry when it's actually chaos. Jordan Peterson often says that truth brings order to chaos, and this is one of those moments. The truth is that love cannot exist without mutual vulnerability. Control is the enemy of intimacy. When someone uses distance to maintain power, they are no longer relating to you as a person. They're relating to you as a source of validation. And no amount of patience, compassion, or effort can heal the dynamic until they confront their own fear of closeness. So what do? You stop rewarding withdrawal with pursuit. You stop treating emotional distance as something you need to fix. The moment you stop chasing, the dynamic begins to unravel. The avoidance control depends entirely on your reaction. When you no longer feed it, they lose the very leverage they depend on. It's not about punishment. It's about balance. You can have compassion for their fear, but not at the expense of your dignity. Eventually, the avoidant will face a choice: either confront their own avoidance or lose the person who is willing to love them despite it. That's where transformation happens. But that choice is not yours to make for them. Your responsibility is to stay grounded in truth, that love built on control isn't love at all. It's dependence masquerading as connection, and walking away from it isn't cruelty. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. They exploit empathy through the victim narrative. This is one of the most deceptive patterns you'll ever experience because it hides manipulation under the mask of vulnerability. When an avoidant says, "I've been hurt before," or "I just can't do relationships," you feel compassion. You see their pain and your instinct is to help. You tell yourself that if you can just love them the right way, maybe they'll finally feel safe enough to open up. That's where the trap begins. Because while empathy is your greatest strength, in the hands of an avoidant, it becomes your greatest weakness. They've learned that if they position themselves as the wounded one, they can avoid accountability and still receive your emotional labor. The victim narrative is powerful because it shifts focus away from responsibility and onto sympathy. Every time they withdraw, it's because they're overwhelmed. Every time they dismiss your feelings, it's because they don't know how to connect. You start excusing their neglect because you've been taught that healing takes time, but what you don't notice is that the relationship becomes one-sided. You're doing all the emotional work while they simply exist, offering just enough sadness to keep your hope alive. It feels noble to stay. You tell yourself you're being patient, understanding, and loyal, but what you're actually doing is enabling their emotional immaturity. You've become a caretaker instead of a partner. Jordan Peterson often talks about the danger of rescuing others from their own chaos. When you rescue someone, you deny them the chance to confront their shadow, the part of them that must take responsibility for their suffering. Avoidants use their wounds like armor. They know that as long as they appear fragile, people will handle them delicately, and if you're empathetic, you'll carry the emotional weight they refuse to face. It's not that their pain isn't real, it's that they use it to avoid growth. They've confused being understood with being healed. You might find yourself rationalizing their coldness. They're just scared, you'll say, or their silence. They just need time. You begin to absorb all the discomfort in the relationship. You become emotionally responsible for two people, and that's exhausting because no matter how much compassion you give, it never changes the dynamic. They take, you give. They withdraw, you pursue. They hurt you and you forgive because you believe you're helping them heal. But what's really happening is that you're protecting them from the consequences of their own behavior. And that means they never have to change. The cruel irony is that the avoidant often senses this imbalance, and rather than appreciating it, they subconsciously lose respect for it. When someone continuously absorbs your pain without accountability, they begin to see your empathy as weakness. They don't mean to, but that's what control does. It distorts perception. Your kindness becomes compliance in their eyes, and soon they're no longer relating to you as an equal, but as a source of emotional supply. Real love doesn't require you to shrink your needs to accommodate someone else's wounds. Empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. It's not your job to heal someone who refuses to take responsibility for their own patterns. The healthiest form of compassion sometimes looks like distance, saying, I understand your pain, but I won't let it destroy mine. That's not coldness, that's integrity. The truth is, people only grow when they're forced to confront themselves. When you stop cushioning an avoidance behavior with empathy, you give them the greatest opportunity for transformation. They may finally realize that their trauma doesn't excuse their choices, and if they don't, then you've spared yourself years of emotional depletion. Love isn't proven by how much suffering you endure, it's proven by how much truth you're willing to uphold. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone lost in their pain is to stop letting them use yours as shelter. Disappearance is their favorite test of power. When an avoidant person suddenly vanishes, stops texting, ignores your calls, or simply goes silent for days or weeks, it's rarely without reason. You might think they're overwhelmed, busy, or emotionally flooded. You make excuses for them because you want to believe it's temporary. But often, that disappearance is a deliberate test. It's a way for them to measure how much control they still have over you. They want to see if you'll chase. They want to confirm that you still care enough to break your own boundaries to reach them. This is the avoidance silent game of dominance, a game played through absence rather than aggression. It's not always conscious. Many avoidants don't even realize they're doing it. They grew up equating intimacy with suffocation, so when closeness starts to feel too real, their instinct is to retreat. But what's hidden beneath that retreat is fear of losing control. By disappearing, they reset the emotional balance in their favor. They create distance so that you're the one in pursuit again. That way they can re-enter the connection on their terms. It's not about needing space. It's about maintaining authority. They're not looking for peace. They're looking for proof that you'll always come back. The most painful part is the confusion this creates. You're left questioning yourself. Did I say something wrong? Did I push too hard? Was I too emotional? The silence becomes a mirror reflecting your insecurities. You replay every conversation trying to find the moment things shifted. But that's exactly how the avoidant keeps control, by making you doubt yourself. You begin to associate their absence with your unworthiness, and in that confusion you become predictable. They know that after a few days of silence, you'll send the message. You'll apologize for things you didn't do. You'll try to fix what was never broken. Every time you do, the pattern strengthens. Jordan Peterson often says that people teach others how to treat them through what they tolerate. When you keep chasing someone who disappears, you're silently teaching them that their withdrawal works. They learn that silence brings attention, so it continues. They vanish, you panic, they return, and you welcome them back because relief feels like love. But that's not love, that's trauma bonding. It's the emotional equivalent of holding your breath underwater and calling the first gasp of air connection. The truth is, Disappearing to test someone's love isn't strength. It's emotional cowardice. It's the behavior of someone too afraid to communicate honestly. Real intimacy requires presence, not punishment. And yet, many people stay trapped in this loop because the moments of reconnection feel intoxicating. When the avoidant finally reappears, they might act warm or even apologetic. You feel validated again. But what you don't see is that this cycle is designed to keep you dependent. The disappearance breaks you down, and the reappearance rewards you. It's classical conditioning, and it keeps you hooked. Breaking free requires awareness and self-discipline. The next time an avoidant disappears, resist the urge to chase. Let silence meet silence. It will feel unnatural at first, almost unbearable, because your nervous system is addicted to the cycle. But that discomfort is the beginning of healing. When you stop reacting, you remove their power. You show that your peace isn't negotiable. And in that moment, something powerful happens. They're forced to confront their own emptiness. Without your pursuit to soothe their ego, they have to face the consequences of their withdrawal. Some will run again, others might reflect. But either way, you've reclaimed your dignity. You've shifted from being controlled to being conscious. Remember this: people who truly care don't disappear to test your devotion. They stay to build your trust. And if someone's love demands that you prove your worth through their absence, it's not love you're fighting for. It's control disguised as affection. The moment you stop chasing that illusion, you start attracting something real. They offer intimacy only when they sense you're slipping away. This is one of the most confusing and manipulative cycles in a relationship with an avoidant, because it makes you believe that progress is finally happening just when you're ready to walk away. You've spent weeks or months feeling unseen, neglected, or emotionally starved. You finally start to detach, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. You begin to redirect your energy toward yourself, and for the first time, you feel a small taste of peace, and that's when they show up. Suddenly, they're attentive, affectionate, and emotionally available. They say the words you've been waiting to hear. They reminisce about your best moments together. You feel a rush of hope. Maybe this time they've changed. But this reappearance isn't transformation, it's a reaction. They're not coming closer because they've grown. They're coming closer because they can feel you pulling away, and they can't stand the loss of control. This moment reveals something essential about avoidant behavior. It's not that they don't want connection. It's that they want it on their terms. They need to feel in control of when, how, and to what extent intimacy happens. When you're fully available, they withdraw because closeness threatens their autonomy. But when you're emotionally distant, they panic because your withdrawal threatens their control. So they dangle intimacy like a reward, giving you just enough emotional warmth to re-engage your hope. It's a push-pull dynamic that keeps you emotionally captive. You become addicted to their unpredictability, constantly chasing those rare moments of closeness as proof that the relationship still has potential. Jordan Peterson often talks about how chaos masquerades as passion. That's exactly what this is. The roller coaster of emotional distance and sudden intimacy tricks your nervous system into mistaking instability for love. You start equating anxiety with chemistry, thinking the highs and lows mean something profound. But this is not passion. It's manipulation rooted in fear. The avoidant has learned that when they sense abandonment, they can regain control through crumbs of affection. They don't need to offer commitment. They just need to offer enough attention to keep you emotionally anchored. And once you're hooked again, once your hope has been revived, the pattern resets, they withdraw, you chase, and the cycle continues. The tragedy of this pattern is that it keeps both people stuck. The avoidant never learns how to sustain true intimacy because they rely on crisis to reconnect. And you never experience consistent love because you keep mistaking temporary relief for genuine change. It's an emotional illusion, a mirage of closeness that disappears as soon as you trust it. And every time it happens, you lose a little more faith in your own judgment. You start believing that the problem is you, that if you were more patient, more calm, more understanding, they'd stay connected. But what's really happening is that they're rewarding your detachment, not your devotion. The only way to break this pattern is to recognize the difference between effort and strategy. True effort is consistent. It doesn't appear only when threatened. A person who genuinely wants to connect doesn't need you to walk away first to realize your value. When someone only offers intimacy to stop you from leaving, that's not love. That's control fueled by fear of abandonment. And if you fall for it, you reinforce their behavior. You teach them that your boundaries are negotiable, that all they have to do to regain power is offer minimal affection at the right time. So the next time they reappear, don't be swayed by sudden tenderness. Observe the timing. Ask yourself, Did they come back out of love or out of panic? Genuine intimacy doesn't depend on loss to be real. It grows through presence, consistency, and courage. Anything else is dependency disguised as passion. And the moment you stop responding to fear-based intimacy, you create space for something far more powerful, a connection that doesn't vanish when you're close and doesn't appear only when you're gone. The power to end the cycle lies in your boundaries. It's easy to believe that the avoidant holds all the control. After all, they're the ones who decide when to withdraw, when to reconnect, and when to open the door just enough to keep you hoping. But that illusion of power only exists as long as you participate in it. The moment you stop rewarding avoidance with attention, the dynamic begins to collapse, because avoidance thrives on reaction. Every text you send after their silence, every emotional explanation you offer when they dismiss you, every time you lower your standards to keep the peace, all of it teaches them that their behavior works. They learn that withdrawal brings pursuit, and pursuit brings validation. You become the stabilizer in a system that's designed to keep you off balance. But when you stop playing your part, the entire structure crumbles. Boundaries are not walls, they're lines of clarity. They say, this is how far I'll go for you, and this is how far I'll go for myself. For someone conditioned to chase love, setting boundaries feels almost cruel at first. You'll feel guilty. You'll fear losing them. You'll question whether you're being too harsh or too demanding. But that discomfort is a sign that you're stepping out of emotional servitude and into self-respect. Jordan Peterson often says that discipline is better than impulsive kindness because discipline builds order while unchecked compassion can invite chaos. Boundaries are that discipline. They don't punish the avoidant. They protect you from disappearing into their chaos. When you begin to assert your limits, you interrupt their control loop. Imagine the avoidant disappearing again, expecting you to chase, but this stay calm. You maintain your silence not to manipulate, but to preserve peace. Suddenly, they're faced with the emptiness they've been avoiding. Their own fear, their own loneliness, their own lack of control. They realize your energy is not infinite, and that moment can be transformative for both of you. For them, it's a mirror. For you, it's liberation. You discover that your strength doesn't come from being chosen, it comes from choosing yourself when someone else won't. Boundaries also help you see reality without distortion. When you stop chasing, you finally see whether they're capable of stepping forward. If they don't, you have your answer. It's painful, yes, but it's truth. And truth, no matter how harsh, is better than false hope. You'll notice that people who truly care about you respect your boundaries. They don't test them. But those who are addicted to control will try to break them. They'll call you cold, distant, or selfish because your boundaries expose their manipulation. Don't let guilt pull you back into dysfunction. You're not abandoning them. You're refusing to abandon yourself. The healing process that follows is not easy. You'll have moments of doubt, moments where you miss them, where silence feels like punishment instead of peace. But as you hold your ground, something powerful happens inside you. Your nervous system begins to settle. The constant state of emotional hypervigilance fades. You start to remember what stability feels like, and from that space, you can finally see the truth about love. It's not supposed to feel like survival. When you enforce boundaries, you're not closing the door on love. You're opening it for someone who knows how to stay. You're saying to the universe, I am no longer available for relationships that thrive on imbalance. And that decision changes everything, because while the avoidant may lose their control, you gain your freedom. The cycle ends not when they change, but when you do. You reclaim your worth by choosing peace over pursuit, clarity over confusion, and truth over illusion. That's when love stops being a battlefield and starts becoming a home, one built on respect, presence, and mutual strength.